Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the last leg of the event. Before we get started, Nidhi, speaking of AI and big data, I really could have used some of that last week when we were trying to get the Coldplay tickets.
Tell me about it. I was ready with three devices constantly refreshing my page. Felt like I was in a tech war zone. If AI had handled that ticket booking, maybe it wouldn't have felt like a horror episode.
Seriously, I kept thinking, shouldn't AI have predicted this chaos? You'd think with all the data available, it would know when all of India is trying to book tickets at the same time.
Exactly. Imagine if AI was managing the queue. Instead of us staring at the spinning wheels, it would have calmly said, "You are 3.5 millionth in the line. Would you like some chai while you wait?"
Right. And with big data, it could have at least predicted the real chances of getting the ticket, right? Like you have a 0.1% chance, maybe try Coldplay's live in Brazil instead.
Plus one to that. I believe that AI could have saved us from a heart attack. And but hey, if we could crack the code, maybe on the ticket booking using AI, maybe next year, real tech innovation we need in India, we would have that in place.
Absolutely. Hopefully someday we will get to see that in action.
With that, we come to the last talk for today. In the previous talk, we observed what role of data and AI occurs in enabling drug discovery. In the similar space of life sciences and healthcare, we would want to now shift our focus on accelerating drug discovery. Are there ways we can instill models or automations that can reduce the time taken from drug discovery till launch? Let's hear more on how AI can help accelerating drug discovery, building a generative AI powered preclinical knowledge engine. Having spent 8 plus years in Thoughtworks and total experience of 13 plus years, Sarang has worked as and played multiple tech roles in his career: DevOps, DevOps engineer, data and AI engineer, tech lead, and account tech principal, to name a few. His industry exposure is varied, including domains such as healthcare, retail, banking, astronomy. Alongside working on multiple tech stacks and domains, his expertise also lie in building and productionizing generative AI applications. Sarang is currently leading projects at Thoughtworks for a healthcare client, focusing on leveraging Gen AI to accelerate drug discovery, where he is spearheading the development of advanced research assistants designed to reduce the drug discovery timelines. He has conducted training sessions and workshops on Gen AI, including topics like Gen AI and Retrieval Augmentation Generation, RAG. Let's hear what he has to say about accelerating drug discovery, building a generative AI powered preclinical knowledge engine. Sarang, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Over to you.
So I'm informed that the audience is mostly project managers, BAs, and we also have a few tech folks. So I would like to try to I'm a developer, and so basically I tend to speak a lot on tech. So I'll try to convert it in a form that maybe I think all the three folks you are able to understand. Um, my promise to you is at the end of the talk, you will have just enough information to understand what it takes to build a LLM application. Um, Now, though the topic is very much on healthcare, considering the background of the folks, I feel that it's also tweaked in a way that we have just enough information on the domain and just enough information on the tech. So if you have questions, note them down. I'll promise you that I'll answer all of them towards the end. So, so this is a healthcare topic. Um, High-level agenda that we will look at is we'll start with the problem statement that we're trying to solve. We'll talk about the solution that we have been working with this towards this particular problem for some years, and now how we kind of approach the Gen AI towards the tech details. This is a live example, and this is basically a case study that we have published. The client that we are working with here is Bayer, and we have also published 2 case studies on this particular topic. All right, so let's get started. Let's talk about the problem statement. Good that we had like one talk just before this on drug discovery. I'll quickly recap on in one slide what a drug discovery timeline looks like. When I'm talking about drug discovery, we're talking about discovering a new medicine for a particular disease, let's say. So this particular timeline, like from the time we kind of start with the um, um, uh, finding out this medicine to kind of get that medicine into the market, it takes about 12 years currently. And it's a big problem to solve around how do we kind of reduce that timeline to kind of make it as smaller as possible so that more medicines can come out and treat drugs. So the stage one is basically a drug discovery where a lot of scientists kind of start with, let's say I want to treat a medicine for a headache. Then they'll start experimenting with lots of compounds, maybe thousands of compounds. And then they shortlist those thousands of compounds into hundreds of them. And now they have like 200, 300 compounds with them that they think might be effective against treating the disease that we are targeting. Then they start experimenting those things on animals. Now, you might have seen that in movies, or generally you would have an understanding that whenever we are going through drug discovery, before a lot of these compounds are being tested on animals, like rats, mice, things like that. And out of that, then a few compounds are then further shortlisted, and then basically there are very few compounds that are being tested on humans, let's say 4 or 5. That is called clinical development. And then out of those 5 compounds, one compound comes out. So you can see like there is a huge funnel. You have thousands of compounds at the start that you experiment with, and you have one drug that comes out of all of those compounds, which is quite fascinating. Our focus for this talk is on to the stage 2 here, which is preclinical development. So the client reached out to Thoughtworks for about 3 years ago, and what they wanted to build was, so basically they came and said that they want to build a Google for this preclinical domain. Now the problem is, like, let's say I have done a particular study on a particular compound uh, 10 years ago, and let's say person X comes in and wants to do the exact same study. And if that person is able to find that study that I have done, I think it's a huge saving for that person. And also it saves time, cost, and money. To give you a perspective that, we're not just talking about, so you finding a duplicate, you finding a study that was done earlier, I think it saves a lot of costs and efforts. But just to give you a scale of it, you can take a look at it. So for example, if I'm doing a study for just 4 weeks on a monkey, so it costs me about €1 million. So if I'm able to find that same study exactly that was done earlier, I have a saving of €1 million. Now, it's also lives that are being lost in the process of those studies because we need to sacrifice animals. So for example, about 10 to 12 monkeys, or like about 10 to 12 dogs are being sacrificed throughout this course of one study. So if you are able to save, and if you're able to find an exact same thing that was done earlier in the past, I think it's a huge saving in terms of both cost and lives and time as well. So let's take a look at what we did. So I think this is, in one slide, I'll try to talk about what we had done earlier before GenAI World. So since they wanted to build a search, they had a search problem, right? So they wanted to kind of be able to find the right studies in the time. What we did is, like, we went ahead and built it like a data as a product. So we build a product. So we build a key data product is called study, and then what you see on the screen is like sort of an interface that has some search fields. For example, now in this particular interface, I can come and type a rat, and I hit studies, and I'll get all the studies done on rats. And there are similar things, similar other metadata that you can search against. We also built a lot of advanced visualization on top of every study, so that a user has a lot of information in a nice presentable format. But when GenAI came in picture, I think things changed dramatically. So for example, here, to study a rat, to get hang of all the rat studies, you would have basically look at structured data. So I think we will only look at structured data that was being captured during that study phase. But when GenAI came in picture, the unstructured data, which was study PDFs, actually started being helpful. To give you a perspective of this, we're talking about here building a data platform by pulling in data from various different data sources, uh, putting them together, harmonizing, creating an application, creating a new data model, and building a full stack application, which is a search engine on top of the data model that we have created. So it was a large project, and it was fairly good, fairly large data platform that we had built. But now that made our life a lot easier, because a lot of times what used to happen is the data that we used to kind of get from these sources was corrupted, because Bayer is in operations for over 50 years and they have a lot of data. That data is subjected to multiple system migrations. So it is possible that you don't have a lot of data available from 30 years ago. Whereas uh, it is compulsory for the researchers and scientists to publish the study PDF or the study report at the end of the study. So you have all those study PDFs from the past. So now you have like a gold mine trapped in there, which was kind of going to be released. So we started thinking that, okay, whatever we have solved so far is a search problem. How do we go ahead and empower research with the data that we have? So we solved the search problem, and now we wanted to take a shift. So anyone currently kind of goes to Google and, for example, types something to search. The main motive behind that search is to actually answer a particular question. So why don't we just directly go ahead and ask that question, right? And what we did is exactly that. So we build a search engine, a chatbot, or we call it also research assistant, that will kind of, which is built on top of the study reports. We also kind of also added the database that we have built for the last 2 to 3 years. We also ingested that information. And now users can come and directly ask questions on top of those data, which is quite cool. But that's just step 2. What we could also go ahead and do is basically users go ahead and ask a particular question to do some stuff. So for example, I want to write a report, and hence I want to refer a particular study report to write a new report, right? So why can't I just go ahead? So why can't I build an assistant that will do that for you? So the third stage is basically do stage, where the agents come in picture, where they do stuff on your behalf. So we are automating stuff for user on their behalf, which is quite fancy. And it also saves a lot of time for the users. So first we'll focus on the ask phase, and then I'll talk about what we did there, and then we'll get into the do phase, and I'll talk about what we did there. So just for you to kind of get a quick understanding about what we are talking about and how we are building this chatbot, you need to understand what is retrieval augmented generation. So to put it in a very simple words, you ask a question to LLM. LLM is large language model, something like ChatGPT. ChatGPT is an application. You basically are asking a language model a question and you get an answer. So for example, if I ask a question that what is the meaning of life, and in 10 words, it's able to kind of tell you, like it's a pretty good answer. I like it. But if you ask a question which is specific to your data, obviously it will not know, because this model is not trained on your data. Now, what if I provide a context and a question, right? For example, here I'm asking that what animal was used in this study. The answer was, I don't know. Again, I'm asking the same question, but I'm giving some context where there is, I hope you see my pointer. So there is a study here that I have mentioned in the context, and then there is a subject and title mentioned. And if I'm asking that what animal was used in the study, it is able to refer back to the context and say, oh, the study used in this study was mice. Now, that's a comprehension problem, right? We used to get this in exams, where in the exam they would give us a paragraph saying, read the paragraph and answer the question. And there was a kind of comprehension questions we used to answer in our exams. I think exactly the same thing ChatGPT is also able to do. Now, we are leveraging the exact same concept, but what we are doing is we are basically bringing in the context that you see on the top automatically into populating that automatically. And we'll see how. So basically, you ask a question, so you have a question, And there is something called as information retrieval. It's kind of a process. So you can consider it like a black box where you ask a question. And in this particular black box, what we have done is we have embedded all the text, all the study PDFs that we have we have. And imagine that black box, if you ask a question, is kind of able to give you the right paragraphs from where the question could be answered. If that happens, this is exactly the same scenario. So you have a context kind of populated by this black box or by this, let's call it information retrieval system. Um, and then you basically pose the same question and relevant context and you get the answer. This is basically how 90% of the chatbots are built. Whenever we are talking about a chatbot that is going to answer a question based on us proprietary data, this is exactly the case that is mostly happening. Now, let's zoom in a little bit onto the processing, the black box I was talking about. So this is usually powered by semantic search, not necessarily. There are various ways to also do it, but more usually powered by something called a semantic search. So it's similar to, like, for example, you go into Google and search for gelatin and you get the results for ice cream, or you search for football and get results for soccer. So it's basically semantic is like meaning, semantically similar things. And what we do is we have questions, and those similar to the questions, whatever text chunks we see in the databases, we bring them up. That is called retrieval. Now, if you want to take this concept into production, just retrieval is not sufficient. You need to do some further processing before you do the retrieval step. And after that, you do the retrieval step. So I think it's both pre-retrieval is involved and post-retrieval is involved. So we'll understand this with the example so that it's even better for you to understand. But for example, I have a question here. Like here, I'm asking for a particular, this question is corresponding to a particular study, and asking that were there any particular clinical finding observed in this particular study, and the findings that I'm looking for are like piloerection, ataxia, loose feces, eyes partially closed, etc. So if you go and ask this question to chatbot, it'll ChatGPT, let's say it'll say, I don't know. But if you come and ask this question to our chatbot, we call it Prince, Preclinical Information Center, it's able to give me a good answer. And now it also provides me from where exactly this information was retrieved from. So I can point, user can click on this link and go to the correct source from where the information is retrieved from. So it's also helps us making it more trustworthy. Now, how we did it is like what you see on the screen. This is like a Q&A architecture, which is for MVP. We've kind of evolved further than this now. So on the right-hand side, what you see is kind of a tech stack that we use to build this application. And I will explain this Q&A architecture with a graphic in a bit. But what you see here is these 3 steps that you see in blue are pre-retrieval step. This is the retrieval, and this is the post-retrieval. So user asks a question and gets back a response. So let's explain this. So we take the same question that I just gave you. So where any of the following clinical findings were observed in a particular study. So what we do is we take this question and send it to language model, and then ask that language model to kind of extract keywords from this. So for example, it extracted specific keywords from the question. We also ask it to extract a filter condition that now this language model in the prompt that we are sending to the language model will also give it understanding about how the database is structured. So it knows what columns or what metadata is present. So it'll look at this particular metadata and then say that, you know what, that's the where condition that there. So it'll create a where conditions that study ID equals this value. Step 2, what we do is basically create a similar, so we do query expansion. What that means is you create the similar queries that was provided by the user. So if you look at it, if you read any of the query, the semantic meaning of the query is exactly same as this. However, it's structured slightly differently. Now, this helps when you're doing a semantic search, because then semantic search, whenever you do it, while structuring the query slightly differently, there is a chance that it works on basically approximate nearest neighbors and all of that. But I think you don't need to get into technical details. But basically, you frame the question slightly differently. The vector databases or the semantic search engines basically give you better results. And what we do is basically take all this information that we have kind of gotten from language model and send it to our database, which is hybrid search, which is open search. We do a hybrid search query here. So basically we do keyword search using these keywords. We also are doing query expansion. So we also do a semantic search using individual queries, and we get back results. So let's say we got about 20 chunks or text chunks that this database thinks that are kind of relevant for the question. So what we do is next, we take all those chunks and then feed them to Reranker. Now, Reranker is another different types of model, which is basically look at the question, is also able to look at the chunk and able to say that this chunk is more relevant to the question than the other chunk. So and then it kind of gives you the ordered chunks. So for example, if let's say the question was being answered from this particular chunk, it'll kind of rank it to the top. And then we kind of just get the top 7 chunks because we know that those are the most relevant chunks that could answer the question. And then basically you give it to the language model just the way we saw it in the earlier slide. So we have a question, and then we have the context, and we ask language model that based on the context, answer the question, and you get the answer, right? So this works really well. So this is also, if you want to kind of take one slide out of this entire talk, this is the one slide you should take out of this talk. So pay close attention to this. And if you have questions, let's address. But what happens is this works really well. So there are some other questions which were like our scientists had no idea how to kind of get that information from. Something like find compounds which are associated with fluorosis. I think we got answer for this question like in seconds, which was quite amazing. Then there were other questions like you want to find a study with a particular liver toxicity, but not with other toxicity. And language model was able to kind of get that information really well. It just blew their mind. And if it also was able to propose a study design, which was quite nice, right? So you get a faster and better insights. Now, this is all good. This is all good. This is MVP that we talked about, but this is not sufficient, right? So in the architecture, we saw that we are answering question based on those 7 chunks. What if you have a very complex question, right? And then that question cannot be answered by, let's say, out of those just 7 chunks, and you need more information for that. That's a problem that you can't answer, right? And then what you could do is basically what a human would do. Let's say I give you a complex question that is like a larger question. You need to look at multiple studies and get that information from. So let's understand what a human would do, right? So first of all, as a human, I would kind of look at the question and try to kind of segregate that question into smaller sub-questions. So I will create smaller questions. And now individual questions I will kind of try to answer. And once I have all answer to all the smaller questions, I would combine all that answer and then answer the bigger question. Now, once I have that answer, I'll go back and look at the question and then figure out, is that answering the question? Is there something missing? If yes, all good. If not, I will continue the process, right? What we would do is, what we have currently in place is this bit. So you have a Q&A architecture that kind of answers smaller questions. What you want to do is you want to get that question, break it down, and you also want to kind of be able to combine that question into the final answer and repeat that in a loop. Now, this is something that we could do using language model again, right? You can replace those X with language models again, but you could go further and then bring in agents here. Agents are nothing but there are like various definitions of agents, and the world is trying to figure out what an AI agent is. Currently, what we are saying is basically agent has a state. Agent understands environment or gets understanding about what the system is able to take decisions and is able to take actions accordingly. So, for example, it looks at a question that says, "Oh, it's a larger question. It cannot be answered by our retrieval system. Let me break it down." It'll break it down and then kind of go ahead and then combine those answers it'll also be able to kind of reflect on those answers that it generated. It'll look at, this is the question, this is the answer. Is there something missing? Is there something not missing? How is the answer? Can I improve the quality of this answer? Is there something hallucination? Should I go and check if this information is not feeling correct? Which is quite nice, because then this kind of improves our system quite dramatically. So so you can think about n number of use cases using this pattern, right? Now what we're trying to do is, this is like the automation that human does in work. So a good example of this is, for example, writing assistant. And the hypothesis that we kind of came up with, so I want to build a writing assistant. Basically, what happens is a lot of users spend sometimes weeks or sometimes months in writing reports. And those reports are based on the studies that they have done in the past, just to come up with one report. Can we do something similar? So like, we have access to those studies. So if a user says that I have access to those 10 studies and build me a report, and I would say, okay, what report you want to build? And I say, okay, I want to build a I&D report. There are various types of reports. Then the language, then this particular agent, this agentic system has an understanding about what report I'm talking about, what sections those reports would contain, and what information each section should have. It'll go back, look at those study reports, bring in all the information needed, and write things section by section, and give me final output in, let's say, PDF format or document format. I think that'll be really cool, right? It'll save months of effort. It'll also reduce copy-paste errors, because a lot of times when you're talking about these study reports, you're talking about complex tables. You need to look at individual values and copy-paste those values. So I think it's quite a lot. And then it also improves the quality, right? So we are working on this at the moment as we speak. So we just talked about one agent that would solve the complex question problem. But now for building writing assistant sort of a thing, you need multiple agents. So like, you need one agent who will kind of go and, let's say, I'm look at all the data, and so whatever data that is required for a section, it will kind of try to get all of that data together. We call it researcher agent. It will kind of bring that all the data and then pass it on to writer agent. Writer agent is specializing in, for example, writing things. It understands the format. It understands what information should go in what section, in what format. It'll write that down. And then basically, it'll take the data, it'll take what is written by the writer and give it to a reviewer, like a QA process. And then the reviewer will look at that data, look at the information, and it will say, oh, there is some data point missing in the what is written by the writer. Let me add that, or let me give that feedback to the writer. Or there is some data point which is written wrongly. Maybe something is some sort of a hallucination has occurred while the writer has written. And reviewer will basically kind of give that feedback, and then that loop will kind of continue for a while, and then they give back the final report to the user. And I think this is fascinating. But this sort of a problem, if you want to, this is really good for production, POC. You want to productionize it. I think there are different challenges that you face, because whenever you're talking about autonomous agents, you need to figure out how a user can, how are you able to balance the autonomy, and how you're able to balance a good user control. So I think both those aspects are really important when you're talking about agents. So you need to make sure, so we need to build a UX where these agents are autonomous enough, but wherever you feel like, oh, they are going off track, you should have ability to kind of put them back on track, right? So you need to have the right interrupt mechanism to kind of bring them to where they should be, or give them feedback whenever needed. So for example, a writer wrote something and then the reviewer is reviewing something. I want to kind of give feedback on what is written in while the process is going on. So I should be able to stop the process, give feedback to the writer, and then reviewer kind of looks at that feedback and is able to kind of even improve upon that. So I think that's a very interesting challenge to solve. So you want a good control of human. You want a good control. You want just enough control of these agents on these things, and you need to make sure that it's not hallucinating. It's like factually accurate. That's like the ultimate goal of this, because these language models, do hallucinate. I think that they're meant to hallucinate, right? And you need to make sure that they do not occur, because the reports that we're talking about are compliance critical. So it's a very interesting problem to solve. Then, and then that's where we need to really consider that how do we build trust, right? Because you can, so I have seen that a lot of clients, a lot of projects have done a bunch of POCs on GenAI. So it's kind of um, everyone is doing POC, and then very few percentage of those POCs are actually converted into production applications. And that is because productionizing an application takes efforts, and it's like and it is a different ball game than a POC. So you need to really understand what it takes to build, take a POC into production. So you need a good quality data. You need a bunch of things for that. But few things I'm like just listing down here, that how do you build trust? And this trust could be that a trust of a team into the application, that the trust of a user into the application. And it's interesting to know like why I'm putting like the trust of a team, because let's say I'm a software developer, I build a software, and I know how the software is going to behave. When I'm building a language model application, you don't know how the language model is going to behave, because that's completely out of your hands. And hence, it's important for us to kind of still figure out that what is the behavior of a language model and how are we able to tweak that in the right fashion. For this, you need to have a really good monitoring system in place. So you need to monitor live traffic and system behavior. You need to test a lot. You need to also, I think the first thing, whenever you're starting, the recommendation that we generally give is whenever you're starting with language model projects, the first thing you should do is ask users what type of questions are going to be asked and what is the ground truth for that question, and then start from there. So always start from what the good looks like, what are the good answers looking like. And once you're going live, or once you decide to go live, you need to have automated evals in place. I think that's I think evals is something like test, where you basically test that if a particular question is asked, if this is the question, this is the answer. Like an end-to-end test, right, that we do. But it's on steroids. So you basically need to have a set of questions and a set of ground truth answers for those questions, and then you need to kind of figure out, is the question similar to what chatbot has given? And there are various things doing, and evals is like one of the most most interesting thing that is being worked upon. Everyone's trying to figure out how to do the right evals in the right way, and there are a few libraries that we can talk about, but this is still a very much of a research. It's active research going on evals. In terms of users, now let's say I'm a user of this chatbot. How do I know that I trust the answer that is coming up? So the first thing I want to do is, if I'm trusting, so for example, you go to Perplexity, right? And then Perplexity is a really good example of a chatbot or a RAG-based chatbot to build. So if you should definitely use Perplexity. It's free. I think someone asked that question, like what is free to use for free chatbot to use for coding? I think maybe Perplexity is a good place where you have like few pro questions that you can ask. So you get references for every question. For example, there is a citation that is needed for every line you write. So if I look at an answer, and then that answers, every line is kind of referred from a particular report, and I can link to that exact line from where this particular answer was taken from, that increases the trust of users dramatically. And it also helps basically language model to kind of confine its answer and not hallucinate. And then what we also do is we saw that, right? Like in building this chatbot, we are building a lot of steps. There are a bunch of steps you're taking. Can we make those steps transparent to the user, so that user is able to look at, oh, I think chatbot is kind of hallucinating. It's going in a different direction. Let me steer it back. So if it's able to look at individual steps that is going on, it also helps them understand what's going on behind the scenes, and then ask or fine tune their prompts better. While all of this is true, something might still go wrong. So you still need to kind of train users on how to use the chatbots and set the right expectations. And you should also have like right system controls in place. You need to make sure that you have automated hallucination detection in place. You need to have, you make sure that chatbot is not getting too much creative. Temperature is equals 0 means that we are kind of restricting. So temperature is a parameter in language model that tells you how much creative it can be. So it ranges from 0 to 1, 1 being super creative, 0 being no creative at all, very factual. So you start with temperature 0 for such projects, and you iterate. You can't constantly improve on like what you're building. So throughout this applications, I think we face quite a lot of challenges. I'm not sure how much I'm doing on time. So I'll skip this bit, but basically what you can do is there is a case study here that is published. That this is first case study on the initial platform and the second case study on the chatbot that we have built. Maybe you can go through this for more details and understanding. This is a public case study. All right. Thank you.
Any questions here before we move to the online questions?
I have a question on that re-ranking of chunks. You mentioned that we can use models to re-rank the chunks. So is that a part of the retrieval itself, or after that we are connecting to a separate model to do the re-ranking?
Yeah, just a sec. Let me go back to that. And I really wanted to said that this is an important slide because I think this has become a de facto sort of architecture for a lot of projects that have happened, at least in Thoughtworks. So we're talking about re-ranking, right? So this is usually a cross-encoder model. It's a specialized model for re-ranking. So what this does is basically, so slightly technical to tell you. So what happens is in the vector databases, you have a vector space where you have all the chunks kind of structured. So you imagine it like a two-dimensional diagram where you have a lot of dots, and you put a dot as a, and you get a question, and that question is kind of placed in those 2 dimensions. What you do is you basically look at what is near to that dot, right, and then bring all those chunks. These are chunks. So what is happening here is when you are actually retrieving the chunks from the vector database, no model has looked at question and answer on its own. Whereas what cross-encoder does is it looks at a question, it looks at an answer, and says how much semantically similar those two are. And so it has 20 chunks. So basically, it will kind of give a ranking to all those 20 chunks. And then based on those ranking, basically, it will figure out that the particular chunk which was here is like more closer to the answer. It is most likely to give the answer. That's called a cross-encoder model.